Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners. And Belcourt Theater, now playing A Private Life with Jodie Foster, Begon's Resurrection, and The Testament of Anne Lee. And opening Friday, Kristen Stewart's directorial debut, The Chronology of Water, belcourt.org.
I'm Blake Farmer, and this is Nashville, a roundabout edition. Well, boy, do we have some timely and somewhat touchy topics to discuss today. Some of us, or at least our vacant homes, spent yet another night in the dark and cold, 12 days out from losing power. Thousands are still without electricity in the Nashville area, though that number's going down by the hour. Hard to imagine a scenario where you could go this long without heat, without lights. Blame the infrastructure, blame the leadership, blame the trees. Blame will certainly come up today, but we mostly want to see what we have learned at this point and assess how we fared with Winter Storm Fern. We're taking your calls today. What questions are you having a tough time getting answered? What have you learned? What has you concerned? What has you proud of Middle Tennessee? Who's sticking up for NES? The number is 615-760-2000 to join us live on air. We're also streaming video at the WPLN YouTube page, and the chat there is an easy way to get a question or comment on the air. Let me introduce our panel. To my left, first time on the show, I believe, Rita Roberts-Turner, an attorney with Klein, Solomon Mills, KSM, working in labor, employment, and contracting. Previously, Chief of Staff for Nashville Mayor Carl Dean and Metro's Director of Human Resources, importantly, during the 2010 flood. So some serious disaster experience here. Welcome to This Is Nashville.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Bruce Berry's back, now retired from his professor gig at Vanderbilt, so watch out. Yeah. But Bruce writes political commentary for the Tennessee Lookout. Thanks for coming back.
Happy to be here.
And Cynthia Abrams covers Metro government for WPLN. Had a busy couple weeks, but now her power at home's back on, so really nothing to complain about. She no longer has to write stories with her gloves on. So
very true.
Thank you for being here. Rita, can you start us off? You've been, the right hand of a mayor. You've led a Metro department during a disaster. How would you grade the response of Metro Nashville and the state with this ice storm?
I have to say leadership is hard. And it's so easy to sit back and Monday morning quarterback and talk about what you would have done differently. And so I'm hesitant to talk about a grade. What I will say is a real pride that I have in our city and our people is this resilience that we show. We showed in 2010. I'm what people call, I've been called an indigenous Nashvilleian. An indigenous Nashvilleian. So I've seen a lot of winter weather. I've seen a lot of natural disasters, if you will. A major blizzard when I was in elementary school. A tornado while I was in law school.
Right, 98?
Yes. And, of course, the 2010 flood. And what I think is a real mark of great leadership and what former Mayor Carl Dean showed was this idea that I'm in it with you. I'm not in an Eiffel Tower of leadership, watching things happen, but I'm really in the trenches with you. And I think, I'm obviously not in the inner circle of Mayor O'Connell's administration, but I've seen him attempt to do that as well. And I think that's a real gift, in a sense, where you can reassure people, we don't know when it's going to be over, but I'm here with you, and together we're going to get through this. And that's something he really brought to that situation in 2010, and I think people are trying to bring to this storm.
Well, Nashville Electric Service has been the focus of a lot of people's energy, and not just people, who are still in the dark. The mayor himself, Freddie O'Connell, the governor, Bill Lee, Congressman Andy Ogles, Senator Marsha Blackburn, all calling for changes of some kind. NES CEO Teresa Broyles-Applin was asked about this during a press conference this week, and her response was brief.
Accountability is important, and we are committed to working with all of our community and political leaders.
Yeah, Bruce Berry, other than the fact that we're talking 12 days later, a few thousand people still without power, what is it about the NES response here that has resulted in pretty much a bipartisan backlash?
Well, I think it's a few different things, different angles of this. People have talked a lot about communication and about the way in which NES has communicated with the public during this as a source of a lot of angst. And I think that communication takes two different forms. One is literally the communication like that clip you just played, right? An NES official, in this case, Ms. Broyles-Applin, the CEO, making a public statement in response to a question. But a lot of NES's interaction with customers also comes through its technology platforms. People using texting, for example, to report outages and then hearing back updates, people interacting with the outage maps online. And there have been flaws throughout all of these processes. The leaders of NES, including Teresa Broyles-Applin, have proven themselves to be not very skilled at communicating with the public in a time of crisis. They just aren't good at it. Mm-hmm. We didn't know that. We didn't even know who they were until 2 weeks ago. But it turns out they're not very good at it. But like I say, the communications deficits here are not just about humans talking into microphones at briefings and such, but also about the way in which the utility communicates through systems with all of us, its customers.
To listeners, what questions do you have for NES? Are we showing enough sympathy here? How has the communication on your end? Have you, like me, you could check your outage and it says that your house has power when it does not. The technological issues, we welcome your calls at 615-760-2000 or comment in the video stream at the WPLN YouTube page. We got this call just before the show.
Good morning, this is Nashville. This is Rita Herzog calling. We are fire survivors of 9 years. We were displaced. We lost our home to a house fire. And I have to say, several days into this dislocation, we were reflective of what we went through. We felt a community sense with everyone else's loss and displacement. But I have to say, I also was thinking about the folks in in the Ukraine, where their power system's been bombed. So as Americans, I think we can get through this, and I think that we have more sympathy and empathy with people across the world who have no light at the end of the tunnel right now. So while it was terribly inconvenient, we just got our power back and had our first night in our home last night. I just feel grateful and thankful for Nashville community and NES workers. Thanks for giving me the platform to speak. Have a good day.
Thanks for the call, Risa. You can join us now live at 615-760-2000. A vote of confidence, we can get through this, but a lot of attention on a utility and board and governance that doesn't usually get a lot of attention. Cynthia Abrams, remind us how the city's relationship with NES even works.
Yeah, so we just heard from Teresa Broyles-Applin, the president and CEO. And so her role is selected by the NES board. And that is a group of 5 unpaid board members. And though that board is appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the Metro Council. Keep in mind that the board members' timelines are different. So not all of the current board has been appointed by the current mayor. Some were appointed by the previous mayor. That board sets the terms of office and salary for the CEO. The CEO is in charge of all the things you would expect, overseeing construction, contracts, compensation, things like that.
So in other words, it's not exactly controlled by the city itself, but the mayor does appoint the board, who appoints the CEO. So there is real control there.
Exactly.
This comment from YouTube, Infinite Valence, who says NES was getting over 10,000 people back online per day for more than a week and keeps getting the remaining people online every day, which is staggering from having about a 250,000 folks without power. Yes, it was a big job. Rita, we saw Mayor Freddie O'Connell last week kind of put some distance between himself and NES even. You had a utility official stop joining the city's press conference and just did their own. I don't know. Is this the mayor just trying not to be blamed for, kind of the tough time NES is going through?
I don't know. I mean, we're at the end of the day, we're one city. And again, we have to all come together and be in this together. I loved seeing at the very beginning of this, Mayor O'Connell with the fire chief and with Chief Drake. That showed a real united front. And I like seeing a united front, obviously, with our city's elected leadership and NES and any other official. But I think, O'Connell certainly has to show, Mayor O'Connell has to show the people that he's in it with us, as I said at the beginning. And so I think he wanted answers. He wanted answers for the people. He continues to strive to get those answers for the people. Is that done separately or, better together? I can't say, but I do think he is seeking the answers for the people, and that's what's important.
Bruce Berry.
I think it was kind of a bad look for the press conferences to become separate for Mayor O'Connell, for Freddie to get up there now day after day and have Chief Swan, Chief Drake, and Scott Potter from Water and these others, and then, basically without actually saying it, be silently saying, and, tune in an hour from now on a different channel, and you can catch the NES part of this briefing. It probably would have been better if it all stayed together. But I'll answer your question more directly, which is, yes, I think it is him trying to distance himself from the kind of fecklessness of their public relations. And that's a shame. And I think that it's sort of understandable, but yet at the end of the day, he's going to be, he's going to be held accountable in part for this as well. He can only delay that accountability, even though, as Cindy points out, I think it's something interesting to understand about NES is that it operates very independently. They're not, although the Metro Charter constitutes that electric power board, that 5-person board that Cindy was describing, they're not part of the Metro budget.
Right.
They have control over their rate setting and over their budget and over their employment. Their employees.
It's not like a Metro department.
Their employees are not Metro employees, although they are public employees, but they have their own HR and civil service system. So it's a kind of a weird entity in that way, and they don't perhaps have as much accountability as they should. But my guess is after this whole episode, they're gonna.
Yeah. Let's take a quick call. I don't know how quick it'll be. Peter, it's up to you. Peter in Nashville, you're on the show. Go ahead.
I was just going to make 2 comments.
Please.
One is I was around for the 2010 flood, and all of our lines fell in the flood. And we asked NES if they could bury them, and they said, no, it's too expensive. And we offered to pay for it and got the neighbors together, and they still refused to do it, saying their new system would be, storm-proof, which it turned out not to be. We were without power for 8 days.
Peter, what part of town are you talking about?
I'm in the Oak Hill area.
Got it. Your neighbors offered to pay for them to bury the lines?
Yes.
Wow. Did they even give you a dollar figure on what that would cost for?
It was going to be like $150,000, but after having been without power for a week, it seemed like a good investment.
Yeah.
And I would have happily had spent that money to not be out without power for 8 days now when it was 6 degrees.
Yeah. Peter, you said a second comment. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, first of all, the line people did a wonderful job restoring power. I know it took a long time, but it was a disaster of NES's own making. But I'm really hesitant to criticize NES because I'm a little concerned that when Andy Ogles and these other politicians are getting involved in criticizing NES, that it's because they want to privatize it because they don't like having a public utility. So I don't want any of these comments to be taken. I love the idea of a utility that serves the people of Nashville and isn't serving a profit motive.
Yeah, Peter, you got a good point there. Appreciate the call. Bruce, I know you've written about this, and Andy, Congressman Ogles, some of the things he was calling out is like that people who are outside of Davidson County don't have a lot of say because NES serves people, I think, in Hendersonville and parts of Brentwood, and just says that people don't have a voice. Is there a better structure, or is this just us sort of realizing how things are and not necessarily advocating for a change?
Well, on the issue of people outside of Davidson County who are served by NES, I think, and that's been mentioned by some Republican politicians at the state level. Oh my God, NES provides power to Republican counties that are getting this terrible experience. But I think that's a bit of a red herring because let's keep in mind that my research suggests that less than 15% of NES customers are outside the county. It's over 400,000 of their 470 or 80,000 meters are inside the county. So that's a little bit of a red herring. But the idea of who owns and runs our power distribution. The caller referred to, for profit, for example. Let's keep in mind that only about 15% of the country gets its power from municipally owned nonprofits like NES, and then some rural counties get their power from nonprofit cooperatives. But 2/3 of the country gets its power from for-profit energy companies like Duke Power in the Carolinas or Entergy in some other southern states. And I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing. If Andy Ogles is advocating something, it's probably a bad idea. But in this case, I think the better option is to ignore him and just consider more objectively whether power distribution systems that are owned by investor-owned for-profit companies do better than locally owned municipal public utilities. I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah,
it's a complicated question.
Rita, any insight on that as somebody who's found her way around the metro government?
Well, first of all, I want to say, because for that caller and the last caller, the first caller, such a great perspective. Emotions are real right now across the board, but I do want us to acknowledge the great work that the people have been doing. These linemen are out here 15, 16-hour days, and I think it's easy to forget that they have families also. Mm-hmm. My husband's in law enforcement. He had to go out there and do the work for the community, and guess what? He had to leave us in the cold and in the dark, had to leave my senior mother in the cold and in the dark. So in the process of trying to navigate and be sure we were okay, he still had to go out here and do these things for the community. So in the middle of all the political talk, in the middle of all the emotions, let's not forget the human beings who are doing the work, who are out there, who will continue to be out there, who are getting things done, not just talking. And I think that gets lost.
All right, got to hear around the table here. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the Winter Storm Response Commission. We'll also talk tree trimming. Sarah, Mac, hang on the line. We're going to get to you when we come back. Join us on the air with a phone call to 615-760-2000. Stay with us. This is Nashville.
Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners. And Amazon, proud sponsor of WPLN's daily show, This Is Nashville, engaging our differences so we can discover our unity. More on Amazon's community work at aboutamazon.com. And Vanderbilt Blair School of Music presenting an evening with double bassist Edgar Meyer and saxophonist Chris Potter, Sunday, March 1st, their first ever collaborative concert event, live in Ingram Hall. Tickets available at blairtickets.com. WPLN's environmental reporting is supported in part by Nashville Zoo.
Curling, that sport where you slide a big stone down a strip of ice, it's about 500 years old. The star of the show, the curling stone, has come a long way from its humble beginnings.
In the old days, they tried to use anything they could dig out of the ground.
Not anymore. These days, elite curlers only play with granite from one place in Scotland. Hear that story next time on The World.
This afternoon at 2 on 90.3 WPLN News.
I'm Blake Farmer, and this is Nashville, a roundabout edition. We're talking about how we fared with Winter Storm Fern. It's our weekly roundabout, so our panel is hitting some of the headlines and hearing from you. The phone number to join us on air is 615-760-2000, or jump in the chat of the video stream at youtube.com/@WPLN. Panel includes Tennessee Lookout columnist Bruce Berry, WPLN's Metro reporter Cynthia Abrams, and attorney Rita Roberts-Turner, Chief of Staff of former Mayor Carl Dean. Let's go ahead and go straight to the phones. Sarah in Nashville, you've been waiting patiently. You're on the show. Go ahead.
Hi, my question was about the Tennessee Valley Authority. Are they in any way involved in NES? I mean, my understanding was they also helped decide what the prices on electricity are. So do they have any stake in this claim, or how are they involved in all of this at all?
It's a good question, Sarah. There is some history here, and probably our our reporter, Caroline Eggers, who covers energy primarily for us, would be best suited to answer this. But Cindy, what do we know about that relationship?
Well, Caroline actually sent us a little tidbit of context today, just mentioning how the history and structure of NES is intricately linked to TVA, because TVA won a lawsuit against a small power company back in the 1930s, purchased their assets, and then NES was basically formed and took the distributing assets, meaning the power lines. So every large city in Tennessee has a monopoly power company, and they all kind of answer to TVA. It's not just that they buy electricity from TVA, but TVA basically sets policy that affects what they can do in different ways.
So the monopoly aspect, I'm thinking of like when I was in school in Abilene, Texas, you could actually get your power from multiple people. You could like say, I'm going to go with that company, I'm going to go with that company. Bruce, what's unique here?
Well, I think the key thing about that, because I've noticed some people complaining about, with respect to the events of the last 2 weeks, and they have a monopoly, and this is so terrible. And people in other places, there aren't monopolies. It's important to distinguish between electric generation and electric distribution. I mean, you have a monopoly of electric distribution, the lines, the poles, everywhere. I mean, you're not going to have poles with power lines from multiple companies.
Right.
And I believe there's essentially no city in the country that has that. There are places where you have a choice in who you buy your power from. But when the storm comes and the lines are down and have to be fixed, you still have your natural monopoly power distribution company, in our case NES, that's going to do the lines. So competition might affect prices and some other aspects of this experience, but it's not going to affect fixing power lines that are down by a storm.
Yeah. Sarah, thanks for the call. There's more there, I'm sure, but we'll get to it down the road. Let's take one more call. Mac in Hendersonville, you're on This Is Nashville. Go ahead.
Hello, sir. I'm glad you hear from me and you let me have this opportunity to talk to you.
Sure.
Anyway, I try to explain and discuss this situation. We are not looking for the trouble right now after it happened. We are looking for the symptom and how to prevent. Prevention is very important.
Yeah.
But people are looking at, what we can do now. Why are we? God give us common sense. You see, the branches of the tree is all around, surrounding all the high voltage power line. I'm not talking about the service line or low voltage power line. No, we're talking about the high voltage power line, which is at least 8,000 volt or more.
So, Mac, are you saying you want to see better tree trimming essentially from NES or other utilities? Yeah.
They're not doing their job. Now, Mr. Springer, when he was in charge, previous tree trimmer, actually is a supervisor or manager.
Are you talking about at NES?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Springer was the contractor for NES.
I see.
He was retired, and then another lady took over, which I forgot her name.
Okay.
But anyway, she is not doing her job.
Well,
she is not caring
Mac,
as Mr. Springer did.
I see.
And I'm not keen to Mr. Springer, but I was working with him because I have some rental properties, and I have been here in Nashville since '82.
Right. Well, Mac, we take your point, and thank you for the call. We to jump ahead a little bit and talk about trees. I mean, we have seen some of the numbers. The Tennessean even did a story this week kind of looking at the tree trimming budget for NES, and it does indeed look like they have been spending less the last couple of years than a few years ago, like $20 million in 2020 and 21, and down to about $14 million now. Bruce, it strikes me, do Nashvillians historically ask NES to do more trimming? Because I see signs where people are saying, keep your hands off my trees, stop butchering them.
Well, because it seems sometimes like the butchering is what they're doing, right? I think the tree trimming, the business about them cutting the amount of money they're spending on tree trimming has been an interesting little sideshow on all of this. And another example, frankly, of the NES management's poor communication. People have been pointing out that the amount of money in their budget. I mean, they do an annual report where they say how much they spent has been going down, and they denied it. They denied that they were doing less tree trimming. And then they had to explain in a clumsy way that, well, we have a different contractor and it costs less, so maybe we're doing just as much. When what they should be doing is finding an objective way to say, this is how much tree trimming we do in, I don't know, metric tons of some measure of how many trees are trimmed. But this will always be a battle, and it's not being very bold to go out and predict that after this whole episode, we're probably going to see more assertive tree trimming,
I'd say
at least
so.
in the near-term future.
You know, Rita, NES isn't saying a whole lot about this at the moment, as Bruce pointed out, but I don't know, what would you suggest they sort of say about tree trimming and their approach, since it's certainly on the mind of so many people?
Yes. I think there's a word the caller used that I would step back for, and that is, what's the symptom? Figure out the cause. We could run and trim trees, but if at the end of the day, that's not really the problem, have we solved it? I don't know whether that's the answer or not. But I think it does take a moment to step back and say, when all of this is over, let's figure out what went wrong, what went right, and how do we keep it from happening again? But understanding that what you determine in 2026 might not be the most effective and efficient solution in 2036. And so you always have to revisit your plan. But this idea that it's just the trees, go trim the trees, I think we need to be cautious there and take some time to step back. What were all the issues that happened here?
Yeah, probably no easy answer there, as people would like there to be. Let's move ahead to underground lines. We've heard a lot about the benefits of moving power lines underground and avoiding the wrath of those trees. Here's a call from our voicemail line.
Right now, NES is rightly focused on restoring power quickly to everyone. Next, they must focus on longer-term fixes to their infrastructure and operations. Improved underground utilities and a better crisis response must be a part of that focused improvement.
And that's Mayor Freddie O'Connell talking about putting lines underground, which I was a little surprised to hear him talk about. Liv, do we have that clip of the here we go. So this is a call that came in of someone talking about underground lines.
I want to show support to the arborist that just called in and talked about the lack of infrastructure on the power lines. And that's it, exactly. I live in East Nashville, and I have power lines in my alley. It's like a kindergartner drew a map of how to do the power line. There's power lines over the front of my house, there's power lines in the back of my house, and there's power lines across the street in the front. We can't get healthy trees because there's just power lines everywhere. And they need to be underground. I know that costs money, but like he said, it's cheaper than what is spent in disaster relief. And I've lived all over the country, and NES is very, very aggressive about tree trimming. It's one of the worst cities I've lived in terms of tree cutback and tree trimming. And it's one of the worst tree canopies I've seen in the cities I've lived in.
Yeah, perspectives all over the place here, because some people say they haven't trimmed enough, some they've trimmed too much. Rita, I wonder, for folks who want to make that decision to do something, even like a big investment, let's put everything underground. That's the solution here. What do you say?
Always be forward thinking. You have to be. Again, I said at the beginning of the show, leadership is hard. And there will be decisions made under this administration, this leadership in NES, that will have to impact the next group of leaders. So you always want to be forward thinking. What I think would be important, though, as decision makers sit around the table, is to please invite people to the table who do the work. I think it would be interesting to hear from those who are out there restoring the power, cutting down the trees, putting up new poles. What did they encounter?
Yeah.
And sometimes in leadership, we think it's just a certain group of people we need to hear from, and we forget the people who are really out there doing it. And so if we're going to talk about putting, lines underground, let's hear from the people who are dealing with right now the lines above ground and what they think of it.
Yeah.
And let's not think that we have all the answers ourselves.
Yeah, we heard that clip from Mayor Freddie O'Connell, who this week said he's open to and even willing, it seemed, to put some of the city's special transit sales tax into moving utilities underground in some main corridors. To listeners, how would you feel about spending tax dollars to put lines underground, even if it might take a long while, a decade, maybe more? 615-760-2000 is the number. Did a little poking around before the show and looked at other utilities that have done this. In San Diego, they're in the middle of an undergrounding program, they call it, spending about $250 million per year, burying 1,500 miles of lines by 2032. Their issue, of course, is wildfires primarily, not ice, but all about resiliency. The cost per mile, anywhere from $2 to $8 million, and they fund that with a surcharge on power bills. Cindy, do we have any indication that this is a direction that Mayor O'Connell's going to go?
I mean, I can say that it's been brought up at a few of the different briefings we've had. Someone from NES pointed out how 25% of the system currently is underground, and that as they're putting in new infrastructure, they are trying to bury those lines. So it does look like it's slowly moving. I will be kind of keeping my eyes out to see if it's really something the mayor pursues. As you kind of gave an example with San Diego, it's an expensive and slow undertaking. So, which is true also of transit and kind of the upgrades we are making there. So it will be interesting to see if he actually follows through with that.
Yeah,
it's very expensive. Obviously, retrofitting, that is, putting lines underground that presently aren't, is preposterously expensive. And there's a few different ways of doing it. My understanding is, I assume that to the extent that percentage of that's underground is growing, it's because of new development and expectations that new development will be created in that way. And by the way, underground lines apparently bring their own problems and difficulties with repairs and such, but fewer of them would certainly be knocked down by trees in an ice storm. So, there's that.
Well,
I think,
go ahead, Rita.
I was going to say, too, and it's interesting, again, as we think about solutions to not be siloed, and there are so many pieces connected. So we, in my neighborhood, and we just got our power back this week, we have underground, utilities, wires, whatever you call them. But when you talk about the grid lines, and those were the things that were confusing us when we could see neighbors with power and we didn't have it. And so even as you think about if you put something underground, is that the end-all, be-all solution? And so I do come back to let's make sure we think holistically about this.
And by the way, if I could just throw in, when you talk about the expense of underground lines, some of us cynics out here might say, well, I don't know, but the amount of money we put into a new stadium would probably buy a whole lot of underground lines in this city. Just saying.
Thank you, Bruce.
Threw it in.
Let's take a phone call. Here's Shay in Brentwood. You're on This Is Nashville. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. Thank you for taking my call. I just wanted to sort of echo the sentiments that was just shared. I live in a neighborhood here in Brentwood that we have underground utilities, but we still lost power for 6 days.
Wow.
So it does not necessarily absorb, from not experiencing a power outage. I do agree more utilities do need to be underground. That will help. But I just wanted to kind of echo that sentiment. I still was without power for 6 days.
Yeah. Shay, I appreciate you bringing that perspective. That's really helpful. Let's take one more call. Here's who's been waiting patiently. Shannon in Nashville. You're on the show. Go ahead.
Hi. I just wanted to say that where is the personal responsibility in all of this? I'm hearing, blame, but don't plant trees, in your yard where the things are. If you can, have a generator, solar power. There are so many answers, I'm not a prepper, but they have a certain thing. You can't put yourself at the mercy of something, business or the weather, and expect that you're not going to be disappointed in some way. So fine.
Shannon, that's really helpful. Rita, help us sort through that because, I tend to have this opinion as well because I live in the woods, and I guess I chose to live in the woods. And you're like, you know what? You're going to lose power more often. Do we have a generator? No. Okay, that's on me. But how do you balance that when people want to blame someone, but there obviously some personal responsibility in here?
Sure, and as I said, the emotions are real. That's not to discount anybody's emotions, but certainly you can look at, are there some things I could help do to mitigate the situation? My husband and I were actually talking about this. We lost 2 just beautiful trees. But we thought about when we heard the storm was coming, should we have maybe, cut them down? And then throughout the year, should we have perhaps cut them down? But we also sit in the seat of people who have been blessed and are able to do that. I commend some of the faith-based organizations that were giving out generators. Everybody couldn't run to the store and purchase a generator. Everyone can't afford to have landscapers come out and deal with their trees. And so you have to have a balance. And those who can help others, we need to do that. So yes, there's a piece that we can take and we can play in this, but it's not as simple as just simply saying to someone, go out here and buy yourself a generator. Go out here and trim your trees. We have to think again holistically about everything that happened in this situation and being prepared and listening because there are other people, part of the conversation we've had. And as the weather report was coming out, should NES have been out there trimming trees from the line? I mean, so there's just a lot to consider here, but I understand the caller's perspective.
Well, we need to take one last break. When we come back, we'll get to the Winter Storm Response Commission that's being put together. We'll also look at housing and displacement amid this disaster. For Mark and Chris hanging on the line, we'll get right to you when we come back, so please stay on the line there. It's our weekly roundabout, all about how we fared with Winter Storm Fern. Stay with us. This is Nashville.
Funding for This is Nashville comes from you, our listeners. And Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee, helping donors make more possible through the power of community giving. More at cfmt.org. And Zander Insurance, an independent agency, working for their clients by helping them find options for their personal and business insurance needs for nearly 100 years in Middle Tennessee. More at Zander.com. And Belmont University's Department of Theater presenting George Orwell's dystopian classic 1984. Experience the tension, intrigue, and timeless questions of freedom and control on stage. Learn more at belmont.edu/performances.
From Nashville, Tennessee, the Grand Ole Opry is now 100 years old. But what does it mean for an artist to become a member of the Opry?
There's never been a period where being able to play on the Opry was uncool.
You asked Curious Nashville about the Opry, and we have the answer. Listen wherever you get your podcasts or at WPLN.org/curious.
Curious
I'm Blake Farmer, and this is Nashville. Our Roundabout panel is analyzing how we fared with Winter Storm Fern. We're turning our attention to housing and displacement, also talking about the new Winter Storm Response Commission that's being set up. And the phone lines have been ringing all hour, and if you'd like to join the conversation, that number is 615-760-2000. Let's go ahead and work through a couple of calls here as we get going with our panel. Chris, I think calling from Belle Meade. You're on This is Nashville. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm not calling from Belle Meade. I'm calling from the Hillsborough Village Edge Hill neighborhood.
Got it.
And I'm calling just to say that in recent years, there were some fellows working on the phone lines here, and I had a conversation with one of them about why they're not underground.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, Belle Meade has them underground because they're really expensive. And the fact that the mayor's considering it makes me happy because I think aesthetically, it's much better to have them underground. If you're going to, I don't know about practicality, but aesthetically, having all these poles and wires all over town is ugly. So
Well-
if it would also be practical, then that's a win-win. And so I'm in favor of it.
Yeah, I'm certain it's challenging. It makes me think of when Google Fiber was doing this micro trenching all over neighborhoods, and even the little sliver they were making in the streets still was very challenging in terms of how to put that in. Bruce, any reflection there?
Well, the Google Fiber thing, of course, disrupted our streets and still does. Those of us who ride a bicycle are still having to steer around the holes they made into the ground. And trenching like that apparently is one of the ways you could bury power lines underground, but it's not the only way. But I want to just agree with the caller that although it kind of seems beside the point at the time of a storm like this and a crisis like this, the aesthetics are non-trivial. These things are ugly, and cities that don't have power lines all over the place are prettier cities.
Yeah.
No question about it.
I had a friend in town from Europe during the start of the storm, and they remarked on how American of a thing it is to have visible power lines. In Europe, it's not.
Although a funny thing about that is the historical reason for that. In parts of Europe, it's because they were so decimated with destruction in World War II that they had to rebuild their infrastructure at a time when they said, oh, we're rebuilding our utility infrastructure. Let's put it underground. And of course, NES predates World War II.
Let's take another call. This is Mark calling from West Nashville, I believe. You're on the show. Go ahead.
Hi there. Thanks for taking my call. I was calling about asking it's kind of an ignorant question because I don't understand how it works, but it does seem to make sense to me. I question the infrastructure that we have in town. And I would use the example of we see how much traffic there is on the roads now, and we can't really expand the highways much more than they already are. But what happens to the grid with that giant population growth we've had in the last 4 or 5 years? Has the grid grown with it? Because it doesn't seem like it has. And I'm just wondering, and that seems like that's bigger than NES. That's the whole city planning thing.
Yeah.
Does anybody have a response to that?
I'm looking around the table here.
My response is, great question, wrong panel.
Great question, wrong panel. Mark, it is a good question. And, at least in terms of the growth, the one thing that I have seen explained that made me think, yeah, there's a growth issue here is there's apparently a number of different kinds of networks within Nashville just because the network is so old. The network, wrong word. Grid is old enough. I think the neighborhood of Creve Hall has all 4 of those sort of grid types. Makes it very challenging, apparently, for crews to come in from out of town to help us out with that. So, Mark, we'll get to your question. And frankly, maybe our next caller will be able to help with this. Stephen, calling in from Bellevue. You're on This Is Nashville. Go ahead.
Sir, first I wanted to say a little clarification. The TVA sells power to Nashville Electric Service, and that NES was created by the state. And so they took over this old system that was here.
Stephen, you're a retiree from NES, correct?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Underground power is not put in. The trenching, the digging in limestone is extremely difficult. And where it is done, it's done by the contractors who put in the subdivisions, a homeowner that wants it. But when you multiply out trying to go underground with this system, it's just financially impossible.
Were there conversations at NES about underground when you were there?
Sure, about Belmead and putting lines underground and all that, and they still have overhead power lines, and they had power lines on back property lines that had relocated out to the front yards because we couldn't access them.
I see.
But the thing about underground, it's just, try to imagine the millions of miles of cable that you would have to go and dig. And even today, on a new project, the people who developed the project have to put in the piping that the cables, the underground cables, go through. So anyway, I just had to call in, but I have to say utmost how important it is that these men and women that are out here working in these sub-zero temperatures be able to sit down and eat a meal without the threat of being docked pay or whatever. From my understanding, these contract crews were told not to go in restaurants and sit down because it looked bad and people were recording it.
Oh, my.
And I'm like, wait a minute, this is Nashville.
Well,
we're not let these people sit down and have a meal.
Well, I hope that is not the case, Stephen. But yeah, if it is in any way, yeah, you Stephen, we hear how passionate you are about this and taking care of the line crews. Really appreciate your perspective and your expertise offering it for this conversation. Rita,
thank you very much.
Can you the line crew thing? Any word to the community if they're seeing line crews and wondering if they're working hard enough?
I just, I hope that whether it's right now or when all of this is over, that there's a genuine showing of thank you. Whether that's exclusively from NES, the city and NES combined, or just people coming out of their homes. I think about the people I see working in the cold. Could we take them some hot coffee or something?
Seriously.
It's just one of those things, again, when you're in the middle of it, you have your needs you want met. We understand that. But I really hope when this is all over that, and even while it's happening, but particularly when it's all over, that everyone will stop and thank them for the work that they did. And I don't think there's anyone who I've talked to who is even thinking for one moment that they're not working hard.
Rita's calling for a Thank the Lineman Day.
Yes.
It's coming up soon. Let's work through a couple of issues here. Housing and displacement, so challenging. There were a couple of programs that came up. United Way got like an unprecedented number of calls for some Airbnb housing credits for temporary lodging. Cindy, did that go as planned? What have you heard?
I mean, I haven't heard directly from people who utilize those credits, so if anyone wants to call in about their experience. But I do know there was extremely high demand that really outpaced the amount of available credit. Yeah,
I think there were only about 250 or so of those credits. It was if you want to call in, you got one of those, we'd love to hear how it worked. 615-760-2000. Bruce, I had never seen before where the city said we're going to open all fire stations as warming shelters. Even the police stations, most of them were warming shelters. What did you make of that? The sort of immediate warming strategy.
Well, I felt like the opening of shelters at police and fire stations and also other places, that was all, that's all good stuff. Some of it happened a little late, but better late than never. I did feel as though the city, the mayor's office and the administration were slow to get involved with this as a housing crisis. It was really almost midweek last week before I think it was Chief Swan who was at these briefings saying, "Hey, everybody, it's still cold out there, and it's going to be a while. And if you have a plan B, now would be the time to take it."
Yes.
And I felt like he said that about 3 days later than it should have been said, because I thought from the very start of when the ice began falling, the city should have had some kind of more proactive housing strategy. I mean, this was really a housing emergency. I was sort of surprised that at these daily briefings, I never heard members of the administration talking about, here's the occupancy availability for hotels in the city. Here's what we're doing to keep the prices of those hotels down. Here's how we're helping match people who either can't afford hotels or don't know how to book hotels or don't have credit cards to book hotels. Here's how we're getting them into hotels. This should have been, I thought, a much more all-on proactive housing strategy because this was a well-predicted event, and I felt that's one of the places where maybe they fell down a bit.
Over the long term, there's also this issue of people perhaps falling behind on rent or mortgages. We saw the beginning of a pot of money to go toward that. The Titans donated $250,000 to the Metro Action Commission to launch something called the Emergency Winter Housing Assistance Program. Cindy, do we know how that's going to work yet?
It's going to go through the Metro Action Commission. We know that they're going to connect residents who are struggling to pay for rent or their mortgage payments with those dollars. You need to reside within Davidson County, have been impacted by the storm, of course, and then there are certain income eligibility requirements that are supposed to be released today.
All right, so that's something you'll probably hear more about on our air in the coming days. Want to talk briefly about the Winter Storm Response Commission, and no, this is not the commission right here, nor the beginnings of it. But Rita, I was looking at this commission that Mayor O'Connell formed in the last couple of days. I mean, it's not really formed; it just sort of said who would be. A few people would be on it, and that he's going to appoint the rest. But I do wonder, is it really an independent commission if most of the members are appointed by the mayor himself?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I just commend the mayor for forming a commission. It goes back to what I said. It's going to be really important that there be a deep dive, debriefing after all of this is over. What I do hope will come out of this commission is not just an opportunity of gotcha. You're wrong. It's you, finger pointing. There are people who lost their lives, whether it was from carbon monoxide, just the frigid cold. They deserve more than just finger pointing around the table. Their families deserve more. And so what I really hope this commission will do is take this holistic approach that we've been talking about to figuring out what were the good things, what were the bad things, what must we do better. And if all they do is sit around and just talk about the negative and no real solutions, then I think that will be a disappointment and will do a disservice to the people of the city.
I think it's going to be a challenging task for any after-action review because there's a couple of different levels at work here. There's doing a postmortem on the storm response itself, right, and how all this went and what went well and what went badly. And I agree, you have to look at the good and the bad. But there's also these broader questions of looking at how NES is actually organized. You have a lot of chirping from the sidelines of people saying, oh, this board is too small, or it's the wrong set of people, or leadership is problematic, the way the thing is organized is bad. That's a broader set of issues that go well beyond just simply after storm response. And I think that, I don't know if this is the right commission to look at those issues as well. We'll find out.
Well, we will find out, and we'll actually have Mayor Freddie O'Connell on the show for his monthly Ask the Mayor segment. That'll be Wednesday, February 25th. Thank you so much to this panel for kind of helping getting some of this analysis going. Bruce Berry of the Tennessee Lookout, attorney Rita Roberts-Turner with Klein, Solomon Mills, and WPLN's Cynthia Abrams. Thanks for tuning in this hour, and for so many phone calls, even many we could not get to. Apologies for that. This is Nashville's a production of Nashville Public Radio. If you missed yesterday's celebration of 10 years of Curious Nashville, you get the best of the best from a decade of answering listener questions, the story of our rotating restaurant, no longer rotating, the peace sign in the fields of BNA, the governor's abandoned bunker. It's a great listen in our podcast feed or at thisisnashville.org. Today's episode produced by Mary Mancini, directed by Tasha A.F. Limley, Josh Deepin on the phones, board operator Liv Lombardi. LaRange and Namir Blade are responsible for that theme music. The conversation doesn't have to end here. We've got a voicemail box that has been very busy. We're talking about the emotional toll of this disaster next week. Leave us a message on how you're handling it. 615-751-2500. I'm Blake Farmer. Go in peace.
The Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at Vanderbilt University, where adults over 50 come together to learn, connect, and explore. With non-credit courses, cultural programs, local explorations, and trips, OLLI covers a wide range of subjects from history, science, politics, religion, the arts, and more. Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, a community of lifelong learning and friendship, where curiosity meets community. More about OLLI at vanderbilt.edu/OLLI.